Hi, this is Kyle Botter, and today's video I wanted to talk about who you surround yourself with, the friends you surround yourself with, the people you surround yourself with, and why you should be very careful about the people that you let in close into your life. So, the main thing to keep in mind is that the quote, "You're the average of the five people that you spend the most time with," tends to ring true. As an individual, we're really susceptible to the people that are around us. So the people that we spend most of our time with, that we're in close quarters with, the people really do have an effect on who we are and our thought process and how we do things and our actions. And so when you are close friends with people, you tend to pick up on a lot of the things that they like and that they think about, especially if you're very close to them. So acquaintances, you might, people you work with or whatever, you might be more likely to keep more of a barrier, a boundary. Like, I have my life, I have my way of thinking about things, and they have theirs, and that's okay. But when you're close friends with somebody, their mentality really starts to seep into your perspective. And I reflect back on my life, and I've been a pretty social guy for a lot of my life, even going back to childhood. And I always had, a good group of friends. But I reflect back on my life, and I think that a lot of the time I wasn't very careful about who I was friends with. Um, and I would often end up being friends with people who had what I would now say very destructive mindset, very um, they didn't see the world in a very clear way. They're really into, say, conspiracy theories. A lot of the things that I wouldn't do now, like, heavy into drug use, drinking, sometimes criminal activity and things like this. And the thing is, like, I found with myself is like, for instance, I had friends that were smokers, and I had never smoked, but I was at a point in my life, this was, say, 5 years ago, when I really didn't have much hope for my life and I wasn't really happy about how my life was going. And so I think I was like, at that point, I was very open minded to doing what other people around me did because I didn't have any clear sense of direction for my own life. And so these friends that I hung out with, they smoked all the time. So I picked up smoking and I just started smoking, and I knew it was bad for you and I knew it causes cancer and everything, but I think I wanted to fit in, not in the sense of necessarily wanting to be liked by them. I think that was a part of it, but I think it was more a lack of direction of like my own mentality of like what I wanted out of life, and a clear goal and direction for my life. And I think when you lack a clear focus and a clear direction and really strong philosophies about like how you should live in the world, you're really susceptible to like, oh, well, they do this, maybe I should do that. They do this, well, they drink all the time, well, I'll start drinking all the time. And you're really like kind of blown about by the wind of other people, and other people's wills will impact you and will change you. And the thing is, when you spend a lot of close time with somebody, you start to identify with them and start to be more like them, and it can happen politically. Like, if you are, say, a liberal person and you start spending a lot of time with conservatives, you're probably going to start becoming a little more conservative, and vice versa. If you're a conservative that starts spending a lot of time with liberals, you're probably going to become more liberal, because just the day-to-day interactions with these people will chip away at your personal philosophy of how you see life politically, how you see the world. Take a happy person and surround them with depressed people, and they're probably going to get less happy. Like, their internal happiness is going to be stifled and it's going to be reduced. And say the opposite also holds true. If you're a very depressed person, spend time around a lot of happy people and you'll probably become a little bit more happy, because the happiness of others will start to change your mentality, and just the automatic ways that you think will start to shift. And of course, if you have clinical depression, sometimes you can be around millions of happy people and you'd never be happy. But I think it generally does hold true that the human mind and identity is pretty permeable. That is, like, you're open to the will and the opinions of other people around you. some people are more or less, like when we look in psychology, there's the big five personality types. And one of them is openness to experience. And so if you're open to experience, I think you're open to the outside world. You're saying to the outside world, like, hey, I'll listen to you. I'll think about what you think. I will debate in my mind whether what you think is right. I'll experience what you experience. And if you're low on openness to experience, you're closed off. And so the way that people think and what they do doesn't affect you as much, which openness to experience is good. I think it's generally good to be open to the world and to want to interact with the world and grow and learn. But at the same time, being too open, there's the saying, be open-minded, but not so open-minded that your brain falls out. You can be open-minded, but like, say you're surrounded with flat earthers and you yourself don't have a very strong conception of, thinking that the world is a globe. You can start to be convinced of, like, they start to say more and more this flat earth propaganda. And eventually you'd be like, well, you know what, maybe, it's a different perspective and I can honor different perspectives and blah, blah, blah. And then if it goes on longer and longer and longer, eventually you're just like, wow, maybe they're right. Maybe, the earth really is flat. And in my life and in my mind, one of the biggest things that I aspire to is seeing reality as it is, seeing the truth as it is, and not lying about what is real and not lying about how I think the world actually operates, whether it's comfortable or not. I just want to align myself with the truth and do what I think is, aligned with reality. And oftentimes people don't live in accordance with reality. They live according to whatever they think, their friends believe, or often what is cool and what is trendy. And there was an article I read a while back about how political beliefs tend to become cool or uncool, and there's a trendiness to them. So say, like in the late 2010s, early 2020s, the liberal worldview seemed to permeate everything. A lot of like Black Lives Matter and LGBTQ stuff permeated, what people on the right would call woke culture permeated the world. And that was cool. But then there was a backlash, and then it became like having a more like those trad cath people and like traditional lifestyles, that became more like cool. And so it's like these political beliefs, it's like people are just vibing and they're just going with like, well, this is cool, and then the culture shifts and okay, now this is cool, and then the culture shifts back and okay, and now this is cool. And people are just reacting and changing their entire philosophy of what is right and wrong based on the culture around them and what's going on. And it's as disposable and trendy as fashion. Fashion in the early 2010s, it was like, tight pants were huge. And then by the time 2019 hit, with Gen Z, it was like all loose, baggy clothing. And I think politics and mentality changes just as much as fads and trends. And the deepest things that people think is right, like in the 80s, greed was good. And in the 60s, earlier, the hippie movement, it was like all peace and love, man. So the entire mentality of what is right and wrong seems to shift over time. And so it can be really hard to find a consistent view, because if you keep a consistent view, everybody changes around you and suddenly you're uncool, even though you're still believing what you think is right and what you think is good. But getting back to like friends, I've reflected on my life and I've been through seasons, and there were seasons where I thought like, oh, the friends I have now, are, the best friends I could have because they're smart and they're funny and they're in tune with, pop culture and whatever. And then like, I find myself where I am now, and I don't know if I'm ever going to be a part of a friend group, in like a really close, tight-knit circle, because personally, I just think there are a lot of difficulties with that. I think it's difficult to stay, super close friends with people, because these people, you really have to look up to them and you really like have to, be able to your mentality of what you think is right might differ from them, and you don't want them to like influence and get rid of like what you think is like the best for your life. And if you think something is really good for your life and you really believe it, then these people around you might drag you down subtly. Um, and so if you can find people who really build you up and really support what you're doing and are focused on your growth, and whether it's like in wealth and status and fame and fitness and mental health and building strong relationships, supporting your family, whatever you think is right, you really have to be selective of like who these people are, because they can very subtly undermine you. And just by spending time with them, you're not an island for most people, and you will subtly start to believe in that undermining, and you might, lose some of that focus on what you think is really right. And so for me at this point in my life, like I have, a very close friend that I talk with every week, and I'm pretty content with that because, he has a mentality that I think works with what I also believe. So hopefully this was interesting to you. Once again, my name is Kyle Botter, and please like and subscribe if you liked it. And if you think anybody would benefit from hearing this or find it interesting, please feel free to send that video along. So thank you very much. Bye.